Hello and welcome to In the Spotlight with Quocirca, the definitive podcast on digital disruption in the print industry. I'm Louella Fernandes, Director of Quocirca, and today I'm joined by Adam Bishop, VP of Marketing and Alliances at EveryonePrint. Today we'll be discussing everything to do with security around cloud and enterprise cloud adoption. So welcome Adam, it's great to have you today on today's podcast.
Hi Louella, thanks for having me.
So maybe if we could start off with, I know you've been in the print industry for some time, so maybe you could tell us a bit about your career in print to date and your role at EveryonePrint.
Yeah, I guess I started out, it must be nearly 10 years ago that I joined the print industry, joined Ricoh UK. From there, I had a very short stint with Ricoh International, and then moved to Samsung Europe and was running product management in the Samsung Europe team. I then had a bit of a life change and moved across the pond to Canada. I joined Nuance at that time. And so I've always been kind of in and around software. So right through Ricoh, Samsung, and then working for a software vendor at Nuance. And I joined EveryonePrint about 2.5 years ago. We had a conversation around the fact that they were looking to move to the cloud. I was talking to some partners at the time who were saying, hey, we need to work out a plan for cloud. And so all of the right things fell into place at the right time. And effectively haven't looked back. It's been a great ride so far.
Yeah, great. So I know that the main premise of the EveryonePrint strategy is the hybrid cloud platform. And today's discussion is really focused on hybrid cloud adoption. So could you give me your views on what changes you're seeing in the markets in terms of cloud adoption and the challenges for organizations as they move along their cloud journey?
So we've been on this cloud journey, I guess, close to 5 years, if you look at the organization as a whole. And so we've got a whole bunch of customers who are the kind of the early adopters, bleeding edge group. And I think we're moving far closer to the mainstream in terms of cloud is now becoming a very normal thing. We're seeing all of the big customers coming out with RFPs or tenders or looking at their options. I think when you saw Microsoft release Universal Print, what's that been, the last 12 months, effectively, they've been working on a kind of beta release and the formal release more recently. So I think we're now in a position where we can say cloud is mainstream, and customers are looking to adopt kind of across the board. We see SMBs, we see enterprise, we see government, and I think there are largely 4 drivers behind what customers want to achieve. So they're telling us that they want to consume print as a service. So they've started to do that with almost everything else. So I guess CRM was the first when Salesforce kind of announced their no software strategy. And so customers are now looking down their IT stack and saying, what's left? And print is one of the last things left, where there's a whole bunch of on-premise infrastructure. So customers looking to consume as a service, customers looking to dramatically simplify what they're doing for print. So I think they still see it as a core operation, but actually they don't want to be heavily involved. They don't want to have a high IT touch involved in printing. They absolutely have to deliver a consistent user experience. And I think something that we've seen through the pandemic is customers looking at their user experience at home and saying, wow, we've done a great job of providing office printing, but what do we do in the home? And then the last point really is you look to an as a service model, customers are looking to have security taken care of for them. So they don't want to have to do the updates themselves. They're expecting the as a service model where everything's delivered in a secure cloud, and really the settings and updates and protocols are taken care of for them. So those, I guess, are the 4 key drivers that we see. And like I say, I think it's going mainstream.
So could you give a bit of insight in terms of, I guess, the hybrid cloud platform and how that addresses some of the security challenges you mentioned? Because I guess there are more stringent security implications for some businesses than others. So can you share some examples of how you've worked with some larger enterprise customers in terms of their more stringent security requirements?
Yeah, so it's always a challenge to go into names, but let me give you the industries and you'll be able to work some of them out. So I think in large enterprise, we've got one of the 10 largest banks in the world on our books. We're working with one of the big four accountants right now. And we see a pretty common set of requirements from those kind of enterprises. They're talking about printers and PCs being on separate networks. They're talking about wanting choices over how authentication works, wanting choices around where where documents are stored. So saying they want everything to stay local. They don't really want to send their confidential documents to the cloud in order to enable printing. And these bigger enterprises are really getting into penetration tests. So the big bank that we're working with has done 4 separate penetration tests on our software over the past, 12 months that we've been engaged with them. And each time we are closing gaps and we're closing down the security to the point where the most recent penetration tests with all of the organizations we're working with, we're finding only minor questions around configuration. We're not actually finding gaps in the software. So with the big enterprise, we're seeing, similar requirements and a whole lot of security documentation and penetration tests. In the government, we've been doing quite a lot of work with a number of different national governments, and we're really seeing the governments putting the government frameworks doing a lot of the groundwork to vet the applications, vet the environments, and that's enabling the local councils, municipalities to sign up and take the service with a kind of pre-vetted security, and so that's been an interesting space for us. There's a media organization who was one of the early adopters, and so if I think about 3 years ago, maybe even 4 years ago, they first signed on to cloud printing when our product was very much in the beta stage, and they elected to take the solution more or less entirely on-prem. So they actually took our primary server, installed it inside their environment, and now I guess we're 2-3 years later, they've said, we trust the application, we understand the application, and we'd like to move to public cloud. We actually don't want the hassle of running these servers. And so across those 3 different examples, I think we see customers looking at security in differing ways, but each time it's about having that experience and expertise. As I think down to a smaller organization, we were working with a real estate organization in the US. I think they've got about 20 devices, so it gives you some sense of the scale. But the nature of the business is that they've got an awful lot of freelancers who are effectively real estate agents coming in and using the offices. That means that IT don't have control over the user's devices. So IT are not able to be sure that the laptop or the phone that they're printing from is actually a secured device. And so being able to have a cloud print product enables them very, very simply to separate print and the corporate network, to keep the printers away from the end user's phones, using the cloud for all of the data transmission, and effectively limit their exposure by the services that they deliver to their customers. So it's very, very different in the different industries, but I think what we see is that we're certainly getting a test from the customers in terms of what they want and challenging us on what's possible.
So would you say then that, just picking up on that point, that customers are they recognize the security benefits of moving to the cloud infrastructure, so rather than wanting an on-prem printing environment for security reasons, that they actually understand that the cloud is as secure, if not more secure, than on-prem in some instances? Is that what you're seeing in terms of general trends with some of those customers?
I think almost by design, and especially in SMB, where the SMB's probably not got as much IT resource, or maybe not even got dedicated IT resource, how is it possible for them to stay on top of all the latest patches and security elements? And so for those guys to be able to say the solution we're choosing is going to have security inbuilt, and we're going to naturally be able to keep our users away from our network and away from the printers, it gives them a real inbuilt security in the solution design. And I think as you look at the larger organizations, they're looking at the security challenges in terms of it's the biggest question that they have. Do I have the resource right now to be able to evaluate your security adequately? And I think that's where our hybrid approach is really helping, that a lot of these organizations will say, well, I'm going to keep those services on site. We have a longer term plan to move everything to the cloud, but right now we're going to keep some of these services on site. Maybe the authentication services in the customer aren't yet cloud-based. So if they've still got some sort of on-premise Active Directory, it's important for them to be able to connect that up to a cloud service, but they don't want to open a whole bunch of firewalls. So I think it's really, really interesting for the customer, and what they really need is flexibility on behalf of the vendor.
Yeah, as you say, we've seen a drop in confidence around print security since the pandemic, and really the key reason for that is that organisations are having to implement secure policies for printing in the home environment, and so it's that kind of hybrid work environment. It's not so much the hybrid cloud environment, but actually how do they manage security in both the home and the office environment. So can you give any examples of how you've worked with customers to address the security risks of printing in the home environment? Does the EveryonePrint platform provide analytics and monitoring of devices in the home?
In terms of what we offer, the hybrid development that we have allows customers to really choose where their data is. So customers can run some of the services in the cloud, some of the services on premise, and the hybrid element is to choose somewhere in between, to say these services are going to be in the cloud, these services are going to always stay on premise. And so we have a lot of customers looking at keeping data inside the network and on premise. And so when you move the end users to home, there's a question about, well, how do I connect the printer to the PC? And how do I make sure that the jobs that are communicated are secure? So does my printer form part of my network? And I think that's the biggest question that our customers are asking. How do we make the printers not part of the corporate network? And in fact, how do we get rid of the corporate network? And so we're seeing customers start to think about the way that they can move to things like zero trust as a kind of a buzzword in the industry. But what does that mean for printing, and how do you separate the users from the printers so that the printers ceases to be this ingress point for attackers? And I think it's a really interesting question for customers, and something we're enjoying helping them through.
Yeah, and also just to pick up on the comment you made about the channel and it being an opportunity for them to transition their customers from the on-prem environment to cloud-based infrastructure. What do you think are the challenges for the channel?
I think the challenge for printing vendors and the channel partners who play in this space really is are they ready to embrace cloud fully and embrace subscription? Or if they're only ready to go partway there, what does that mean? I think the opportunity, if I think about it from a customer perspective, customers have probably got 5 key challenges as they think about the cloud. That they have to think about printers as the endpoint. So is my printer, the actual device itself, secure? And I think the industry has done a pretty good job, and the manufacturers are doing a pretty good job on telling that story, talking about how their endpoints are secure, talking about how the print device itself can be secured. And that leaves the customers and effectively the partner opportunity looking at the last 4 pieces, which is the users, the data, the environment that it's hosted in, and then compliance and processes. And so customers are looking at the way they can integrate print to their authentication services. I don't think that's anything new, but certainly the cloud authentication services present slightly different challenges. They're looking at their data. So they're saying, well, is my data encrypted? Is it encrypted everywhere, in transit, at rest? They're looking at the location of the data. So what are the hosting locations? What's my data sovereignty? So if I've got my users in Germany, well, actually, it's important that their data never leaves Germany. And so can the cloud provider ensure that? From an environment perspective, it's not enough to say we use AWS. You actually need to be able to describe how do you configure the cloud? What are the policies and tools that you have in place? And we recently made an adherence to the UK government. It's called UK Official, which is a document classification for top secret documents. So we're actually looking at our infrastructure and making sure it's not just the application, but actually the AWS config behind is meeting those kind of requirements. And then the compliance and processes stuff around ISO and GDPR, customers are going to ask those things. And so I think for the partner, it's going to be, how do I get to understand those things quickly in terms of the vendors that I want to work with? So there are multiple vendors beyond us out there doing cloud print. So can I get quickly to understand that stuff? And can I deliver the answers back to the customers that are going to satisfy them pretty quickly? Of course, as you go up to larger enterprise, the questions get more complicated, but it's how the software vendors who are the experts in this stuff helping the partners to deliver those messages.
Yeah, and I think you've touched on 2 very interesting points there. So the zero trust security, which you touched on earlier, and analytics. So if I just take each of those separately. So like you said, zero trust security has become a bit of a buzzword. Are you actually seeing that businesses are actually looking for cloud printing to address their security, their zero trust security models that they may already be using for their wider IT infrastructure? And how do you see cloud printing fit in that? For example, you mentioned the sort of authentication piece, and I guess that's a core principle of zero trust security.
So I think it's important to define zero trust in some way, because when you talk to some customers, I had a customer literally this week who emailed me, hey, we were looking for this zero trust thing. And I emailed back saying, yeah, well, we've got support for that. And she went, well, I didn't describe it properly. Let me actually give you a definition so that it's not just buzzwords. The simplest definition I've seen is zero trust focuses on three things. So verify explicitly. So you always know who it is. You don't make any assumptions about who this is or what the device is. So you always verify. Least privileged access. So people don't have the ability to get to places that they shouldn't be getting to. In the print world, frequently we think about roles-based access control, meaning things like, can I print double-sided? But actually, if I'm a user based in the UK, can I print to Germany? Or do I have admin roles? Can I see reporting? And so there's an awful lot more that you can configure in terms of permissions. And then the last piece is assume a breach. And zero trust effectively is trying to always assume that you're in a breach status and to minimize the possibility of that impacting the organization. And so I think that's where data encryption is absolutely important. It's not enough to say we can do data encryption if you turn it on. It's what all data transit in our system is encrypted. Even when the data is at rest, it's encrypted. There is no weakness in the system. So we have to assume the whole time there's a breach. And I think that links to the monitoring and analytics piece that you're asking. Because if you've taken care of the verify explicitly piece, and you've taken care of your authentication, and you maybe let the customers use their own security certificates to really have the control over the endpoints. If you take care of least privileged access, so you're able to define the policies that the users have and what they have access to, and IT and the different administrators within IT, then you get to this assume a breach. And how do I make sure that I'm monitoring the system? And how do I make sure, frankly, that the service provider is monitoring the system for me? And then what analytics tools do I have that I can connect into my own systems? So the customers we've talked to are saying, I don't want to use an EveryonePrint analytics system. I want you to connect into my standard IT model. You will put your data into there and it will let me know from all the analytics questions. So the customers will want to interrogate things like, when was the last time we made a policy change? What's happened since the 30th of March? Let me check all of the settings that have been changed, so that they're able really to get into a deep dive of the system, but they're able to do that using their standard tools and fitting into the way that IT works today.
Okay, so that's interesting. So in terms of security monitoring and analytics, then the EveryonePrint platform would integrate with those kind of best of breed IT monitoring tools, I guess, which, makes sense because, IT admins, they'll want to be using the tools that they're familiar with. So that basically, just out of interest, really, in terms of the analytics capabilities that either you have or you're sort of integrating with, in terms of print volumes, how are you be interested to know what trends you've seen over the past year and whether you expect there'll be a recovery in print volumes.
So we published a report earlier in the year because customers started to ask us, well, what's actually happening for all customers, not just for me, but is our behavior normal? Is this what you'd expect? And so we've got some analysis based on the print data running through the platform. And so effectively the platform is collecting metadata on just about every print job that happens. And so we were able to see very early in the pandemic, you could almost see within Europe the lockdowns being announced and the print volumes dropping off commensurately. So we saw, I think in February, we saw a 50% drop just overnight. Things disappeared. And then we've seen that gradually recover until the summer. And then, of course, the summer holidays happened. And so print volumes went down. But I think what we see now is about 80% of the volumes that we saw pre-pandemic. And we also see only about, we see 80% of the devices are being used. So there are definitely devices out there where entire departments perhaps have been sent home and the devices are not being used. So there's a real opportunity for customers to get into understanding their environment, and frankly for partners to bring these customers these insights and say, did you know this is normal? And let's analyze where you are against that, and maybe make some changes in terms of the fleet, in terms of the printing behavior, in terms of what to expect.
Yeah, so basically in terms of, I'm sure you'll agree that at the moment, the cloud printing market, there's, a whole range of different vendors, from the OEMs to the ISVs, and it's quite a diverse market. So for a customer, what would you say are the main considerations they need to evaluate, I guess, when they're looking at a cloud printing platform, not just from the security perspective, but in terms of the broader functionality they should be looking for?
So I guess the most obvious piece is the application security. And I think right now what we've seen is customers are doing a pretty good job. So customers are challenging us on the application. What features does it have, frankly, to enable my security? Can it ensure these things? Can it integrate with those things? And they understand their own environment and what the application needs to do. And so that's number one, and it's the most obvious. I think the thing we're seeing increase now, but we honestly, we don't think we see enough of, is challenges around the hosting platform. So looking at not just our application, but actually, well, where does our application live? Okay, it lives in the cloud. Well, which cloud? Okay, it lives in AWS. Okay, let me dig into the security standards inside AWS. And it's, like I said, it's not enough to say it's in AWS. You actually have to understand how it's configured. And so we see the biggest customers running pen tests against our application. So far, we're in pretty good shape, but mostly what the pen test will be looking for are there gaps in the way the hosting works? Are there gaps in the application? And can we create vulnerabilities? And so application plus hosting are I think the key security concerns for today. But I think the third thing customers need to think about is some future proofing. So as we emerge out of this pandemic and the world goes back to normal, any transitions they make now need to be transitions that stand them in good stead for the next few years. And so looking to cloud native applications, things that are born in the cloud and that adhere to cloud standards without being kind of retrofit and backwards compatible. And then as they think beyond a cloud native application and all of the benefits that come with that kind of regular update process, looking at the path that they want in the future. A lot of customers aren't necessarily ready for zero trust today, but I think a lot of customers will want a path to zero trust in the future. And so understanding how cloud vendors are able to help them with that, help them on that path, help them migrate effectively from what for a lot of customers is 100% on-premise to maybe it's some sort of hybrid where some of our offices are not ready for very specific reasons. So we're going to keep some of the services locally, to eventually everything's in the cloud. And we have customers saying they won't have a corporate network anymore. And so printers will be internet connected, and that they will need everything to be able to run over the internet with the same levels of security that they had before. And so I think that future proofing is a key question I'd be thinking about as I look to adopt a cloud vendor.
Yeah, and I think, the cloud has absolutely been, a brilliant foundation for, businesses to gain agility, security, efficiency and innovation over the past year. And it's really been that kind of, foundation for, businesses to remain operational over the course of the pandemic. And some of those points you raised are really how the cloud can actually help them sort of drive their businesses forward. So I suppose that leads on quite nicely in terms of just the final question around what do you think's next for the print industry, in general, just not just with cloud, but, obviously it's been quite a challenging year for the print industry, and also what's next for EveryonePrint?
So I think it's a broad question, but honestly, I think we're heading into quite an exciting time for the print industry. It's the first time in a long time I felt like I've been able to say that. But I think the pandemic is causing customers to really reassess their relationship with that technology. And so there is a new impetus on moving to the cloud. There is a new impetus on what am I doing with my endpoints? And actually, I understand that the printers are these complex endpoints, but how do I manage them better? And so we had customers right at the beginning of the pandemic saying things like, we've been caught on the hop here. We we had a very reactive strategy for print, and actually now we want to move to a far more proactive strategy. And so they're starting to define that future. And so I think there's a huge opportunity for the industry in guiding customers on that, what customers should be doing, how they should be doing it, and what they should be thinking about, so that effectively we move to a cloud MPS model where customers are able to choose their vendors and choose their vendors to run print entirely as a service. So it's not just managed print services, meaning toner and billing, but managed print services, meaning taking control of the application inside my organization, delivering drivers to the users, and delivering the infrastructure and the patches and the security, so that I'm paying a simple per month or perhaps a per year fee, and everything's taken care of inside that one vendor. So I think it's a really exciting time for the industry. For EveryonePrint, we're looking at a record-breaking year. So we have just literally today, the day of recording, we have announced a global partnership with HP. We are due to sign a second global partnership this week, which I guess will be announced later in the summer. And we have a European partnership, which is coming shortly. So we've very much seen the vendors starting to realize that, hey, this cloud thing is happening now. We've seen our customers just going through the roof. We've got more pipeline than we know what to do with. So it's a pretty exciting time for EveryonePrint. And yeah, we're looking forward to the next fiscal.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's great to hear that, that EveryonePrint's delivered, on, those new partnerships, but also, optimistic for the next year. And, we certainly see, similar things. I think once the offices reopen, we expect there to be some sort of bounce back on print volumes. I think people are, ready to get back to the office now, even if they do carry on working from home for, part of their working week. And, there's opportunities for vendors to help those businesses support their employees, in terms of efficient printing in both the home and office environment, but also tracking and making sure that's secure. And cloud is, absolutely key to that. So, thank you very much, Adam, for your time. It's really great to cover those, those key areas around cloud and security. And I just wanted to end on the final question that I've been asking at the end of each of these podcasts is, we are emerging from, in the UK, at least from our third lockdown. So do you have any plans when you're able to travel safely in terms of any countries you plan to visit?
I'm desperate for a holiday, and I could really do with some sun after a long Canadian winter. But unfortunately, I think my answer is going to be the least exotic of all the answers you get. My travel plans are to go back to the UK. My wife gave birth to our second child about 8 weeks ago. And so my half of the family still haven't met her. And so I think I'm going to be dragging the whole family to a trip to the UK to do some grandparent stuff.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations on the new baby, and hopefully that won't be too far off when you can get to come over to the UK. So thanks again. It's been a great conversation, and I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today.
Thanks, Louella.
So thank you for joining today's In the Spotlight with Quocirca podcast episode. For more information, please go to quocirca.com and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.